The crowbar slipped through her trembling fingers just as the wall panel gave way, revealing stacks of cash so numerous they defied comprehension. What started as a desperate $1,500 gamble on a foreclosed property would expose secrets that powerful people had killed to protect. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. Marcus and Elena Rodriguez had never imagined their retirement would look like this. At 67 and 65 respectively, they should have been enjoying their golden years in the modest ranch home they'd paid off 10 years earlier. Instead, they sat in their rusted Ford pickup outside the courthouse, watching their life's work disappear on the auction block. The morning had started with desperate hope. Marcus had dressed in his only remaining suit, the one he'd worn to David's funeral, now hanging loose on his frame after months of eating dollar menu items and skipping meals so Elena could maintain her strength. She wore the blue dress he'd bought her for their 40th anniversary, its cheerful color mocking their circumstances. "Maybe someone we know will buy it," Elena had said while fixing his tie with shaking hands. "Maybe they'll rent it back to us." But the crowd gathered on the courthouse steps consisted entirely of strangers, investors with calculating eyes and cash ready to profit from others' misfortune. Marcus recognized the type from his construction days, people who saw homes as commodities, not repositories of family memories. The medical bills had started innocently enough. Elena's routine mammogram had revealed suspicious shadows. "Probably nothing, doctor," Martinez had said, with the casual optimism of someone who wouldn't face the consequences either way. "But let's run some tests to be safe." Those tests led to more tests, then specialists with offices in gleaming medical towers where parking cost $20 and appointments were scheduled in 15-minute increments. Each visit brought new terminology: ductal carcinoma, staging protocols, treatment modalities. Words that sounded like a foreign language, but translated to a simple reality, their savings would evaporate like morning dew. The insurance company had initially promised comprehensive coverage. "You have excellent benefits," the representative had assured them. But excellence, they discovered, came with fine print. Experimental treatments weren't covered. Out-of-network specialists required impossible deductibles. Medications that cost pennies to produce somehow carried $1,000 price tags. "We could try the older chemotherapy protocol, Dr. Patel had suggested when they'd balked at the cost of targeted therapy. "It's not as effective, and the side effects are severe, but insurance covers it." Marcus had watched Elena's face as the oncologist outlined the difference: 70% success rate versus 40%, mild fatigue versus debilitating nausea. The decision was made before she spoke. They'd refinance the house, drain the retirement accounts, do whatever necessary to give her the best chance. That was 18 months ago. Now, their home of 32 years belonged to someone with paddle number 47, sold to bidder number 47 for $89,000. The auctioneer's voice carried through the truck's open windows. The amount was insulting, barely half what they'd paid 3 decades earlier, not accounting for inflation or the improvements Marcus had made with his own hands. The new kitchen he'd installed for their 25th anniversary, the deck where they'd hosted countless barbecues, the workshop where he'd taught David woodworking before the boy decided military service called louder than craftsmanship. Elena gripped Marcus's weathered hand as their home became someone else's property. Her wedding ring, the one luxury item she'd refused to pawn, caught the morning light. He'd offered to sell his tools first, but she'd stopped him. "Those are your hands?" she'd said. "You don't cut off your hands." "We'll figure something out," Marcus murmured, though his voice lacked conviction he didn't feel. At his age, with a back destroyed by decades of construction work, employment prospects were slim. The hardware store where he'd worked part-time had closed last month, another casualty of big-box competition. Elena's recent treatments left her too weak for even the greeting jobs at Walmart that seniors usually claimed. They'd explored every option. Reverse mortgages required equity they no longer had. Social Security provided barely enough for food and gas, let alone rent. Medicare covered medical basics, but not the medications keeping Elena stable. The cruel mathematics of aging in America. Too young for nursing home care, too old for starting over, too proud for begging. Their eldest daughter, Carmen, lived in Seattle with her software developer husband, Richard. She'd offered to help, but with 2 kids at Columbia University and a mortgage on a house that cost 5 times what Marcus and Elena's had, her resources were stretched thin. They'd already borrowed $20,000 for Emma's freshman year, a loan that gnawed at Marcus's conscience daily. "Dad, we can make room," Carmen had insisted during their last phone call. "The basement has that mother-in-law suite we never use." But Marcus had seen the strain in Richard's face during their last visit, the way he'd studied bills at the kitchen table while Carmen pretended not to notice. They'd raised their children to be self-sufficient, not to sacrifice their own families for parents who'd failed to plan adequately. Their son, David, had died in Afghanistan 8 years earlier, leaving behind Jessica and twin boys who needed every penny of his death benefits for their own survival. The folded flag from his funeral sat in a storage unit now, along with everything else they couldn't fit in the truck. $20 monthly to preserve memories they couldn't bear to discard. "There's always Carmen's guest room," Elena suggested weakly as they pulled away from the courthouse. Marcus shook his head. "We're not becoming burdens. Not after everything we taught them about self-reliance." "Pride's expensive," she replied, but without conviction. They both knew the price of maintaining dignity. It was choosing between blood pressure medication and groceries. It was sleeping in the truck rather than admitting defeat. It was smiling when acquaintances asked about retirement plans and lying about downsizing by choice. They spent that first night in their truck at a rest stop. Buster, their aging beagle, curled between them on the bench seat. The dog had been David's, returned from his final deployment with a limp and trust issues that only Elena's patient love had healed. Now, 12 years old, Buster required special food for his kidneys and medication for arthritis, another expense they could barely manage but refused to eliminate. The rest stop hummed with the sounds of traveling America, families in minivans heading to vacations, truckers catching mandatory rest between hauls, and others like them, the invisible homeless, living in vehicles, maintaining the fiction of temporary circumstances while poverty ground them down. Marcus had strung a tarp from the truck's raised tailgate to create privacy for Elena to change clothes. Their entire wardrobe now fit in 2 suitcases wedged behind the seats. She'd kept one photo album, the one with David's baby pictures and their wedding photos. Everything else lived in digital form on a phone they could barely afford to keep active. "Remember our first apartment?" Elena asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "That studio above the Korean grocery? 500 square feet of paradise." Marcus replied, "You hung sheets to create rooms. We were so happy with nothing. We had everything. We had hope." The distinction cut deep. At 25, poverty had been a temporary state, a stepping stone to better things. At 67, it felt like a final destination, the last chapter in a story that should have ended differently. Morning brought the harsh reality of hygiene without facilities. Marcus had identified truck stops with showers, but they cost money. Public restrooms became their solution, Elena carrying a small bag of toiletries, maintaining appearance through sheer determination. She still applied lipstick each morning, the same coral shade she'd worn since their courtship. "For you?" she'd say when he told her she was beautiful regardless. "No," she'd correct. "For me. To remember who I am." The next morning, Marcus counted their remaining resources, $3,847 in checking, $1,200 in cash. He'd hidden in the truck's glove compartment years ago for emergencies, and Elena's jewelry worth perhaps another $2,000 if they could find a fair buyer. Her mother's pearls, her grandmother's brooch, the anniversary bracelet he'd saved 6 months to afford, each piece a memory transformed into potential survival funds. "It's enough for a security deposit somewhere," Elena said, ever the optimist despite circumstances. But everywhere they looked, rent prices had soared beyond recognition. The shabby apartment complex where they'd lived as newlyweds now demanded $1,800 monthly for a 1-bedroom unit. Even trailer parks required first and last month's rent, plus hefty deposits that would devour their funds before they'd sheltered a single night. They tried the senior housing wait lists, spending hours in government offices filling out applications. "Current wait time is 18 to 24 months, tired clerks repeated. "Unless you have disability status or qualify as emergency placement." "We're living in our truck," Marcus had pointed out. Do you have documented proof of homelessness from a recognized shelter? Have you registered with social services? The bureaucracy of poverty revealed itself in all its Byzantine glory. To get help, you needed addresses they didn't have, documentation they couldn't access, patience they couldn't afford. Each agency pointed to another, creating loops that led nowhere except frustration. It was while searching online classifieds at the library, free internet being one of the few remaining public services, that Marcus spotted the unusual listing: foreclosed property, as is $1,500, cash only, serious inquiries only, no inspections. Has to be a scam, Elena said, reading over his shoulder. The library's fluorescent lights emphasized the exhaustion lines around her eyes. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but what have we got to lose? Our last $1,500? She pointed out. Which will be gone in a month anyway. At least this gamble comes with walls and a roof. They debated for an hour, whispering in the library's stern silence. Other patrons, DI, some obviously in similar circumstances, offered advice through meaningful glances. The library had become a daytime shelter for those with nowhere else to go, its chairs filled with people pretending to read while actually just existing somewhere warm and safe. The property address led them 40 miles outside town, down increasingly desolate roads until civilization felt like a distant memory. The GPS lost signal twice before they finally located the overgrown driveway marked only by a rusted mailbox bearing no number. This is horror movie territory, Elena observed as branches scraped the truck's sides. Good thing we're too old to run from zombies, Marcus replied, earning a laugh that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her humor 4 decades ago. The house that emerged from the wild tangle of vegetation looked like something from a horror movie. A 2-story craftsman that might have been beautiful circa 1925 now sagged under the weight of neglect. Broken windows stared blindly from the upper floor. The wraparound porch had partially collapsed, leaving jagged teeth of rotted wood. Vines claimed the eastern wall so completely the siding was invisible beneath their green shroud. "Oh, Marcus," Elena breathed. "I know," he replied, but something in the way the afternoon light caught the remaining intact glass made him pause. His contractor's eye saw past the decay. Despite the damage, the bones of the structure appeared solid. Original craftsmanship showed in details that modern builders ignored. The hand-carved corbels still supporting eaves, the stone foundation laid with mortar that had survived almost a century. He walked the perimeter, testing supports with his pocket knife, checking for termite damage and dry rot. The main structure remained surprisingly sound. Water damage appeared confined to additions probably made in the 70s. Cheap construction grafted onto solid bones. The original slate roof, expensive even when new, still largely intact despite missing tiles that had allowed weather inside. A newer model BMW pulled up behind their truck, looking absurdly out of place in the wilderness setting. The man who emerged wore a suit that probably cost more than their truck, his expression one of barely concealed disdain as he surveyed both the property and them. "Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez?" His tone suggested he hoped they weren't. "I'm Nathan Hartley from Hartley Realty. You inquired about the property?" "We did," Marcus confirmed. "Why so cheap?" Hartley's laugh held no humor. "You're looking at why. This place has been on our books for 3 years. Previous owner disappeared, just vanished one day, left everything behind. County seized it for back taxes. We've tried to move it, but..." He gestured helplessly at the decay. "No one wants to take on this level of restoration." "Previous owner?" Elena asked. "What happened to them?" "Richard Mansfield. Bit of an odd duck from what the neighbors say, though the nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, so that's not saying much." Hartley consulted his phone. "Financial advisor? Apparently quite successful at one point. Bought the place in 2015, paid cash. Started acting paranoid, according to the few people who knew him. Stopped coming to town, had groceries delivered. Then, one day, poof, gone." "When was this?" Marcus asked. "March 2019. Left his car, his belongings, everything. Police investigated but found no signs of foul play. No body, no evidence of violence. After 7 years, he was declared legally dead. Hence the tax situation and eventual foreclosure." "Can we look inside?" Elena asked, At your own risk. Seriously, you'll need to sign a liability waiver. The county won't even send inspectors out here anymore after one fell through a floor. He produced papers from his briefcase. And, just so we're clear, this is a cash-only, as-is sale. No financing, no inspections, no contingencies. You hand over $1,500, you own every problem this place has. Marcus signed the waiver without reading it. At their age, with their circumstances, legal liability ranked low on the concern list. Hartley handed over a key that looked like it belonged in a museum. Original locks, he explained. Mansfield never updated them, probably didn't trust electronic systems. The front door opened with a groan that belonged in the horror movies Elena had referenced. The interior was worse than the exterior suggested. Water damage had buckled floors and stained ceilings, with ominous brown patches spreading like diseased flowers. The smell hit them immediately, mold competing with something else, a musty, chemical odor Marcus couldn't identify. Maybe dead animals in the walls, maybe something worse. Furniture remained where the previous owner had left it, now home to generations of mice and spiders. In what had been the living room, a leather recliner faced a television that had been new in 2010. Newspapers yellowed on a side table, headlines about trade wars and political scandals that seemed quaint compared to current events. In the kitchen, dishes still sat in the sink, filmed with dust that had solidified into cement. He left in the middle of daily life, Elena observed. Coffee cup on the counter, mail unopened on the table. Marcus examined the mail, mostly junk, but a few official-looking envelopes from banks and investment firms, all addressed to Richard Mansfield with increasingly urgent messages about response required and account verification needed. The previous owner, Elena asked carefully, what exactly did he do? Hartley shrugged. Financial advisor, like I said, had an office in the city until about 2017, then closed it suddenly. Rumors said he'd gotten mixed up with some questionable clients, but that's just small-town gossip. People love to speculate when someone isolates themselves. They climbed the groaning stairs carefully, testing each step. Marcus went first, his construction experience reading the wood's integrity through subtle cues. The banister, once polished oak, crumbled at his touch, but the stairs themselves held firm. The master bedroom revealed more abandoned life. Clothes in the closet ranging from expensive suits to practical work clothes, reading glasses on the nightstand, a calendar still showing March 2019. The bed was unmade, as if Mansfield had risen one morning and simply never returned. This is where he slept, Elena murmured, disturbed by the intimacy of the abandoned space. A man's entire existence reduced to artifacts no one had bothered to clear. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. The second bedroom had been converted to an office, and here the abandonment felt different, chaotic rather than ordinary. Papers covered every surface, desk, floor, walls, where they'd been taped in seemingly random patterns. Marcus lifted one page, squinting at the faded type. Financial records it looked like, but not ordinary bookkeeping. These showed massive transfers between numbered accounts, codes that meant nothing to him but clearly had significance to Mansfield. Guy was tracking something, he told Elena. Look at this, same account numbers appearing over and over, linked by red string, like those conspiracy theory movies. Elena studied the walls where Mansfield had created a vast spiderweb of connections, photos of men in suits connected to corporate logos, linked to news clippings about bankruptcies and bailouts. At the center, a question mark, drawn in heavy black marker. He was investigating something, she concluded, or trying to prove something. Or hiding from something, Marcus added, noting the heavy locks on the windows, the reinforced door frame, the security system that looked military-grade for a residential property. Hartley waited on the porch, unwilling to risk the interior again. His Italian shoes had no business in a house where the floor might swallow them. So? He asked when they emerged. I know it's a disaster, but at this price. We need to discuss it, Elena said diplomatically. They sat in their truck for 20 minutes, weighing impossible options. Stay homeless, impose on Carmen, or gamble their last resources on a house that might kill them before providing shelter. I can see the bones, Marcus said finally. The original structure is sound. That's 1,920 seconds craftsmanship when they built things to last. The damage is mostly cosmetic and the additions. I can fix it. With what money? Elena asked gently. After buying it, we'd have $3,500. That won't go far at Home Depot. Salvage yards, Craigslist, labor trades. I've built with less. He took her hand, feeling the bones prominent beneath tissue paper skin. She'd lost so much weight during treatment. Remember when we first married? I renovated that whole apartment with nothing but determination and a handful of tools. We were 25, she reminded him. You could work 16-hour days and bounce back. I can still work. Maybe not 16 hours, but enough. The structure's solid, Elena. New roof patches where it's leaked, shore up the floors in the damaged sections, basic plumbing and electrical. We lived without luxuries before. We can do it again. What about the mysteries? Mansfield's disappearance? Whatever he was investigating? Marcus considered. Man's been gone 5 years. Whatever trouble he was in probably died with him. Besides, who'd bother 2 broke senior citizens fixing up a ruin? Elena studied her husband's face, seeing echoes of the young man who'd courted her with promises of building their dreams together. The construction worker who'd built their first home with his own hands, adding touches of beauty to everyday functionality. The father who'd created tree houses and go-karts, who'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with tools and determination. The cancer had taken her health. The medical system had taken their money, but it hadn't taken his spirit. Not yet. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. You sure? It's our last shot. If this fails, then we fail together. I'd rather die trying to build something than waste away in someone's spare room. The transaction was surprisingly simple for something so monumentally life-changing. They signed papers in Hartley's BMW, the leather seats, a stark contrast to their own duct-taped upholstery. Marcus counted out $1,500 bills, each one representing meals they wouldn't eat, medications they might have to skip, security they were sacrificing for possibility. You're either very brave or very foolish, Hartley said as he prepared to leave. He seemed genuinely puzzled by their decision, as if poverty and desperation were foreign concepts his BMW could outrun. Probably both, Marcus agreed. Word of advice? Start with the kitchen. At least then, you'll have somewhere to cook. And get the electricity checked before you plug anything in. Previous owner did some creative wiring that probably violates every code written. There's a well for water, but you'll want that tested too. No telling what might have seeped into the groundwater out here. He drove away quickly, as if poverty might be contagious, leaving them standing before their new disaster. In the late afternoon light, with shadows softening the worst decay, it looked almost romantic. A sleeping beauty of a house waiting for someone to wake it. Where do we start? Elena asked. Tonight, we sleep in the truck again. Tomorrow, we begin bringing this place back to life. They spent that last night of true homelessness making lists and plans. Marcus sketched rough drawings of the house layout, marking areas of critical damage and prioritizing repairs. Elena inventoried their possessions, determining what could be sold for supply, money, and what they absolutely needed to keep. Buster, sensing the excitement despite the familiar truck surroundings, wagged his tail occasionally, trusting his humans to make things right. Their first days as homeowners were brutal. Without power or running water, they continued living in the truck while Marcus attacked the most dangerous problems. The partially collapsed porch had to be demolished before it took the rest of the front wall with it. Using a crowbar and sledgehammer, the few tools he'd refused to sell, he carefully removed rotted wood, salvaging what could be reused. Elena, though weakened by treatment, managed lighter tasks. She sorted through Mansfield's abandoned belongings, separating potential valuables from obvious trash. The man had been a hoarder of information, boxes and boxes of financial documents, newspaper clippings, printed emails, photographs of people she didn't recognize at events that looked important. Look at this, she called from the office. She held a leather journal, its pages filled with dense handwriting. It's like a diary, but all numbers and codes. Marcus examined the entries. Dates going back years, each followed by strings of numbers and letters that meant nothing to him. Some entries included names, corporate entities, offshore holdings, investment funds with generic titles that could mean anything. Guy was paranoid about something, Marcus concluded. Maybe that's why he lived way out here. They found more journals, boxes of them, spanning what looked like decades of meticulous record-keeping. Financial records showed large sums moving through numerous accounts, the kind of money that didn't match the modest decay around them. Either Mansfield had been terrible with personal finances while managing others' fortunes, or he'd had reasons for living below his apparent means. The house revealed its secrets slowly as they cleared each room. Behind water-damaged drywall, Marcus discovered updated electrical work, professional grade and recent, hidden like a shameful secret. The basement, once cleared of debris and examined properly, showed reinforced foundations that belonged in a commercial building, not a residential home. It's like he was preparing for something, Elena observed. All these reinforcements, the upgraded systems hidden behind decay. Most puzzling was the kitchen wall. What appeared to be standard drywall rang hollow in places, suggesting spaces behind that didn't match the home's original blueprints. But Marcus had more immediate concerns than architectural mysteries. They needed basic habitability before they could investigate curiosities. Using skills honed over 40 years in construction, Marcus began the transformation. He haunted salvage yards and demolition sites, trading labor for materials. A morning helping tear down an old restaurant netted him enough lumber to frame repairs. Assisting with a roof job earned bundles of slightly damaged shingles, perfect for patching. Elena proved equally resourceful. She discovered that Mansfield suits, while outdated, were high-end brands that consignment shops would accept. His watch collection, 6 timepieces ranging from practical to luxurious, brought enough to buy a used generator and basic electrical supplies. "I feel like a grave robber," she admitted, folding suits that had probably cost thousands when new. "He's been declared dead," Marcus reminded her, "and he left no heirs. Better we use it for restoration than let it rot." The generator changed everything. With power, Marcus could run tools, making repairs faster and more precise. They had light to work after dark, extending productive hours. Most importantly, Elena could use a small heater, vital as autumn crept toward winter and her thin blood struggled with temperature regulation. 3 weeks into their ownership, Marcus made the discovery that would change everything. He'd been removing water-damaged drywall in the kitchen, trying to trace the source of persistent dampness. The wall construction puzzled him, standard studs and insulation, but something felt wrong about the dimensions. The room was smaller than the exterior suggested. His hammer went through what should have been solid wallboard into empty space. "Elena?" he called, voice strange. "Come look at this." Together they enlarged the hole, revealing not the expected wall cavity but a finished space beyond. Marcus shone his flashlight through, illuminating what appeared to be a hidden room. Its walls lined floor to ceiling with plastic-wrapped bundles. "What is that?" Elena whispered. Marcus didn't answer. The bundles were uniform in size, wrapped in heavy plastic and stacked with military precision. With shaking hands, he pulled out one bundle, slicing through the plastic with his utility knife. The contents spilled across the dusty floor, $100 bills, neat and crisp as if fresh from the mint. They stared at the money, then at each other, then back at the cash scattered around their feet. Without speaking, Marcus reached for another bundle. More hundreds. Another bundle. 50s this time. Bundle after bundle emerged from the hidden space, each containing what looked like $10,000 or more. "Oh my God," Elena breathed. "Marcus, how much?" "I don't know." His contractor's mind was already calculating volume. The hidden room extended at least 6 feet in each direction, possibly more, packed floor to ceiling with wrapped bundles. Millions. Has to be millions. They worked in stunned silence, pulling out bundle after bundle. Some contained cash in various denominations, others held what looked like bearer bonds, gold coins, certificates for precious metals, financial instruments Elena recognized from her banking days before the children were born, untraceable wealth in every form that mattered. When exhaustion finally stopped them, they'd removed only a fraction of the room's contents. The kitchen floor was carpeted with money. Conservative estimates put it at over $10 million, with the hidden room still mostly full. They sat among the scattered wealth, 2 elderly people who'd been choosing between homelessness and begging their children for shelter, now surrounded by more money than they'd see in 100 lifetimes. "This is why Mansfield disappeared," Elena said quietly. "Someone found out about this." Marcus nodded. The journals, the reinforced house, the isolation, it all made sense now. Mansfield had been hiding something worth killing for, and now they'd found it. "We should call the police," Elena continued, though her voice lacked conviction. "Should we?" Marcus asked. "This money, where did it come from? If it was legitimate, why hide it like this?" And if it wasn't, he trailed off, both of them understanding the implications. They spent the night sitting in their camping chairs, purchased for $5 at a yard sale, staring at the fortune spread before them. Neither slept. Dawn found them still, debating in circles, moral arguments crashing against desperate pragmatism. "The medical bills," Elena said finally, "we could pay them all. Get the treatments insurance wouldn't cover. Help Carmen with the kids' college. Set up something for David's boys." "Blood money," Marcus countered, though his protest was weak. "We don't know that. Nobody hides this much legitimate money in their walls, Elena." "Then what do we do? Put it back? Pretend we never found it? Go back to sleeping in the truck?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. They'd already given up so much. Their home, their dignity, their health. Was adding their innocence to the sacrifice too high a price? Marcus picked up one of the journals they'd found, flipping through pages of cryptic notations. In the morning light, patterns began to emerge. Dates corresponding to news events he remembered, corporate scandals, political upheavals, financial crashes, each followed by number sequences that might have been account transfers. "I think Mansfield was a cleaner," he said slowly. "Look at these dates. Every time some corporation got caught with dirty money, these transfers happened right after, like he was moving their hidden assets before authorities could freeze them." Elena studied the entries. Her 2 years working as a bank teller before Carmen was born had given her enough financial literacy to recognize the patterns. So this is what? His commission? Skim funds? Or insurance? Keep copies of everything, hide the physical assets, make sure nobody can make you disappear without consequences. Except they did make him disappear, but they didn't find this. Which means they're probably still looking. The implications chilled them both. Whoever had eliminated Mansfield might still be watching the property. Their sudden residence could have already attracted attention. The BMW realtor would have records of the sale. Paper trails led to anyone determined to follow them. "We need to be smart about this," Marcus decided. "Can't just start spending $100 bills in town. Need to think long term." Over the following days, they developed a careful strategy. The money was recounted and inventoried. Final total, $95 million in cash, bonds, and precious metals. They photographed serial numbers, documented everything. Then, working together, they replaced most in the hidden room, keeping only small amounts for immediate needs. The wall was carefully repaired to hide any evidence of discovery. Marcus used his construction skills to age the new drywall, matching texture and paint so perfectly that even he couldn't spot the repair once finished. They continued living as if nothing had changed. Marcus worked on house repairs with the same salvaged materials. Elena maintained their careful budget, shopping sales, and clipping coupons with the dedication of the truly poor. To any observer, they were still the desperate elderly couple trying to make an uninhabitable house livable on no money. But subtle changes crept in. The salvaged materials Marcus found always seemed to be exactly what he needed, in surprisingly good condition. Elena's medications were mysteriously paid for by an insurance error that nobody questioned. Anonymous donations covered Carmen's children's tuition. David's widow received notice that a previously unknown life insurance policy had matured. "How do we explain it if anyone asks?" Elena worried. "We don't," Marcus replied. "Nobody asks where good fortune comes from, only bad." They studied Mansfield's journals obsessively, learning the man through his careful notations. He'd been brilliant but lonely, using his skills to help powerful people hide wealth while secretly documenting every transaction. The house had been his fortress, built to withstand siege if his clients turned on him. In the end, it hadn't been enough. "There's something else," Elena discovered one evening, reading by the light of their salvaged lamp. Hidden among financial records was a different kind of list. Names, dates, and what looked like cause of death. "Marcus, I think these are other people like Mansfield. Accountants, lawyers, fixers who knew too much." The list spanned 20 years, dozens of names, all dying in accidents, suicides, or simply vanishing. Car crashes on empty roads, falls from buildings. drownings in shallow water, heart attacks in healthy 30-year-olds. Mansfield had been documenting the elimination of his peers, knowing he might join them eventually. "We're in over our heads," Marcus said quietly. "This isn't just money. It's evidence of murders, conspiracy, God knows what else." Elena nodded but gestured around their slowly improving home. New windows gleaned from a renovation site, a wood stove purchased for $50 from an estate sale, now heating their living space. Running water restored through Marcus's skill and determination. "Where else can we go? We're committed now. Our only choice is to be smarter than Mansfield was." They began implementing safeguards. Copies of journals went to a safety deposit box in a bank 3 towns over, paid for with cash laundered through careful casino visits. Elena created digital copies stored in encrypted cloud accounts under false names. They established a routine of recording videos documenting their findings, uploaded to scheduled release if they didn't regularly reset the timers. Most importantly, they maintained their facade of poverty. Marcus made sure to complain about money at the hardware store where he traded labor for supplies. Elena clipped coupons ostentatiously at the grocery store, counting pennies at the register while $100 bills lay hidden in their walls. They drove their ancient truck, rust growing worse with each winter storm, and wore their shabby clothes, patched and repatched rather than replaced. The community accepted them as another pair of struggling seniors making do with Social Security and determination. Their neighbors, when they occasionally met them on the long dirt road, saw nothing unusual about the elderly couple slowly rehabilitating an abandoned property. "You folks are brave, taking on that Mansfield place," said Tom Garrett, their nearest neighbor at 5 miles distance. "Most people won't even drive by it after dark." "Why's that?" Marcus asked, accepting a beer while helping Tom repair his fence in exchange for lumber. "Oh, you know how rural folks are. Someone disappears mysteriously, leaves everything behind. People make up stories. Lights in the windows when nobody's home, cars on the road that turn around when they see someone watching. Probably just teenagers looking for somewhere to party, but it spooked the last few people who tried to buy it. The information was filed away. If locals avoided the property, that worked in their favor. Less chance of unexpected visitors discovering their secret. 6 months passed. The house transformed from ruin to respectable home through Marcus's skilled labor and carefully laundered money. They developed a system for converting cash to usable funds without arousing suspicion. Small deposits to various accounts, never exceeding reporting thresholds. Casino visits where they'd break large bills and claim modest winnings. Selling inherited gold coins to different dealers across 3 states. Elena's health improved dramatically with access to better nutrition and consistent medication. The experimental treatments insurance had denied were now possible through mysterious benefactors and charitable programs that didn't examine applications too closely. Her color returned. The weight she'd lost during the worst of treatment gradually restored. But Marcus noticed she still woke at night sometimes, staring at the kitchen wall that hid their fortune. "What are you thinking about?" he asked one night, finding her at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., warming her hands on a cup of tea. "Whether we've sold our souls," she admitted. "This money came from somewhere. Mansfield hid it for reasons. People died for it. People die for $20 in the wrong neighborhood," Marcus pointed out. "At least we're using it for good. Medical care, education, basic survival. We're not buying yachts or private jets." "I know. But sometimes I wonder if Mansfield told himself the same things. If he started out just trying to survive and ended up." She gestured at the reinforced walls, the security systems they discovered hidden throughout the house. Marcus didn't have an answer. The moral weight of their discovery pressed on both of them, even as it solved their immediate problems. They traded desperate poverty for comfortable fear, always wondering when someone would come looking for what Mansfield had hidden. The first test came 8 months after they'd bought the house. Marcus was working on the roof, finally replacing damaged sections with proper materials bought through careful cash transactions, when a black sedan turned into their driveway. Not the local sheriff's cruiser or a neighbor's pickup, but a vehicle that belonged in city financial districts, not rural properties. He climbed down carefully, his movements deliberately showcasing the caution of age and arthritis he didn't entirely need to fake. By the time he reached the ground, 2 men in suits had emerged from the car. They looked like federal agents from television, dark suits despite the summer heat, sunglasses hiding their expressions, an aura of authority that expected compliance. Mr. Rodriguez? The speaker was younger, maybe 40, with the kind of fitness that suggested gym membership rather than physical labor. That's right. Can I help you, gentlemen? Agent Hartwell, Treasury Department. He flashed credentials too quickly to read. This is Agent Chen. We understand you purchased this property recently? 8 months ago, Marcus confirmed, wiping his hands on his work pants, playing the role of simple laborer. Been fixing it up since. The previous owner was Richard Mansfield. Did you know him? Never met the man. He was long gone when we bought the place. But surely you found things he left behind? Personal effects? Documents? Anything unusual? Marcus laughed, the sound of a man who'd heard this before. Mister, we found 40 years of mouse shit, a collapsed ceiling, and enough mold to kill a horse. My wife's got a pile of old papers we've been using for kindling. Guy saved everything, even grocery receipts from 1995. Agent Chen spoke for the first time. We'd like to see those papers, whatever's left. Like I said, we've been burning them for heat, cheaper than firewood. He led them inside, noting how their eyes cataloged every detail. The modest repairs, the salvaged furniture, the elderly woman sitting at a sewing machine patching clothes. Elena played her part perfectly, the picture of genteel poverty making do. Federal agents? Honey? Marcus announced, asking about the previous owner's stuff. Oh, those boxes in the barn? Elena's voice carried the helpful eagerness of someone with nothing to hide. I've been meaning to finish sorting them. So much paper. The man must have saved every document he ever touched. She led them to the barn where they'd strategically placed boxes of Mansfield's less sensitive papers, old tax returns, utility bills, mundane correspondence that revealed nothing about hidden millions. The agents spent an hour sifting through documents while Marcus and Elena puttered nearby, discussing tomato plants and roof repairs with the casual comfort of a long-married couple. Is this all? Agent Hartwell finally asked, frustration creeping into his professional tone. There might be more in the attic, Elena offered, but the floor's not safe up there. Marcus won't let me risk it until he can reinforce the joists. We'll risk it, Chen said. Marcus led them up, pointing out genuinely dangerous spots where water damage had weakened the structure. The agents picked their way through carefully, finding exactly what the Rodriguezes had left for them to find. More boxes of useless papers, old furniture, evidence of a life, but nothing of value. Mansfield was suspected of financial crimes, Hartwell said finally, giving up the pretense of casual inquiry. Money laundering, tax evasion, hiding assets for criminal enterprises. If you found anything, accounts, cash, bonds, there could be a substantial finder's fee. Mister, Marcus laughed again, gesturing at their obvious poverty. If we'd found any money, would we be living like this? I'm 70 years old, working construction to keep a roof over our heads. You think I'd be patching a 40-year-old roof if I had secret millions? The agents couldn't argue with the visible evidence. Everything about the Rodriguezes screamed authentic poverty. Their clothes, their furniture, their careful spending visible in grocery receipts on the kitchen counter. Even trained investigators could be fooled by consistent performance. After they left, Marcus and Elena sat quietly in their kitchen, nerves jangling from the close call. They'll be back, Elena said. Maybe, but they found what they expected. Poor seniors struggling to fix up a cheap house. As long as we maintain that image. How long can we keep this up? Eventually, someone will notice we're paying cash for things. That our daughter's mortgage got mysteriously paid off. That medical bills disappear. Then we need to be smarter. Create more distance between us and the money. They began implementing new strategies. Shell companies established through lawyers who didn't ask questions. Charitable foundations that donated to causes they cared about while providing tax benefits. Investment accounts that grew quietly, building legitimate wealth to eventually replace the hidden fortune. Elena discovered she had a talent for financial structuring, her brief banking experience, expanded through careful study of Mansfield's methods. She created paper trails that would satisfy casual scrutiny, backstories for their improving circumstances that relied on partial truths. We won a small lottery, became their explanation for minor improvements. Marcus's cousin left us a little inheritance, Elena's medical bills were forgiven by a hospital charity program. Each lie contained enough truth to be believable, backed by documentation that would hold up to basic investigation. But the real test came a year after the federal agent's visit. Marcus was in town buying supplies, chatting with Jerry at the hardware store about weather stripping and insulation, when a woman approached. She was perhaps 50, professionally dressed, but with the kind of weariness that suggested long travel. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Marcus Rodriguez, the one who bought the Mansfield place?" His instincts prickled warning, but he maintained his friendly demeanor. "That's right. You know the property?" "I knew Richard. My name is Sarah Winters. I was a colleague." The pause before colleague spoke volumes. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. Another cleaner, a client, someone else who knew about the money? I see. Well, I never met the man. Bought the place from a realtor. I understand. I was wondering, have you found anything of his? Personal items, perhaps letters or photographs? I know it's a strange request, but Richard and I were close. I'd love to have something to remember him by. Her eyes held genuine emotion, but Marcus had learned to distrust surface appearances. Anyone could fake grief for $95 million. My wife might have kept some photo albums. He offered carefully, seemed ashamed to throw them away. Why don't you follow me home? She can show you what we saved. The drive back gave him time to think and plan. Elena would need warning, but they'd develop subtle signals for dangerous situations. He parked slightly. Crooked, their sign for "be careful." She'd see it from the window and prepare. Sarah Winters followed in a rental car, maintaining proper distance, like someone following directions rather than someone who'd been there before. But Marcus noticed how her eyes swept the property, cataloging changes since her last visit. Elena met them at the door, perfectly playing the hospitable rural wife. Marcus called to say, "We had a visitor. I've put coffee on. You knew Mr. Mansfield?" Over coffee and Elena's genuinely excellent cookies, Sarah told her story. She'd worked with Richard for 15 years, helping wealthy clients structure their finances. Completely legal, she insisted, if ethically gray. When Richard began to suspect their clients were eliminating loose ends, he disappeared without warning. "I thought he was dead," she admitted. "When I heard someone had bought his house, I hoped he might have left some message, some sign of where he went." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. Either this woman deserved Academy Award consideration, or she genuinely didn't know about the money. They made a calculated decision to test her. "We found journals," Elena said slowly, "dozens of them. Most just seem to be financial records, but there might be personal entries. Would you recognize his handwriting?" The hope that bloomed on Sarah's face seemed too genuine to fake. They brought her one of the less revealing journals, watching as she traced familiar handwriting with one finger. "This is Richard's. God, I've missed him." She looked up with tears in her eyes. "I know this is a lot to ask, but could I possibly look through them? See if he left any message?" Over the following hours, Sarah Winters proved herself either honest or brilliantly deceptive. She identified patterns in Mansfield's coding that Marcus and Elena had missed. She explained financial structures that made their hidden fortunes suddenly make sense. Most importantly, she revealed why Mansfield had been eliminating people who helped hide money. "It started with Gregory Paulson in 2017, she explained. "He was found dead in his apartment, apparent suicide, but Greg was the most life-loving person I knew. Then Maria Santos drove off a cliff. Then David Chin had a heart attack at 32. All of us who worked in the shadow economy started seeing the pattern." "You think clients were cleaning house?" Marcus asked. "I know they were. Richard figured out which clients were ordering hits. He documented everything, preparing to expose them. But they must have figured out what he was doing. Or he ran before they could kill him," Elena suggested. Sarah shook her head. "Richard wouldn't run. He had contingency plans for everything. If he disappeared, it was because they made him disappear. The question is, what triggered it and what happened to his insurance?" "Insurance?" Marcus kept his voice carefully neutral. Richard skimmed from every transaction. "Not much, just 1 or 2%. He called it his life insurance policy. Said if clients ever turned on him, he'd release everything. account numbers, transaction records, enough to bring down half the Fortune 500. He hid copies everywhere. Marcus and Elena sat frozen, realizing they'd been sitting on dynamite, not just money. The 95 million in their walls represented leverage over some of the most powerful people in the world. Did he ever say where he hid things? Elena asked carefully. He was too smart for that. But knowing Richard, it would be somewhere secure but accessible, probably multiple locations. He was paranoid about keeping all eggs in one basket. They spent the evening going through journals together, Sarah providing context that transformed cryptic notes into a roadmap of financial crimes. She identified dozens of corporations that had used Mansfield's services to hide profits, evade taxes, and launder illegal gains. As night fell, Sarah prepared to leave for her hotel in town. At the door, she turned back. "I know you found something," she said quietly. Richard wouldn't have renovated a kitchen without hiding something in the walls. That was his signature move. Whatever you found, be careful. The people looking for it have killed for far less. After her taillights disappeared down the dark road, Marcus and Elena stood in their kitchen, staring at the wall that hid their fortune. "She knows," Elena said, "but I don't think she's a threat. She loved him. You could see it. Love makes people do desperate things. So does survival. And we're survivors." They spent that night reviewing their preparations. The journals were dispersed across multiple safe locations. Digital copies existed in encrypted clouds. Their extraction plan, if needed, was simple but effective. Most importantly, they'd maintained their cover as struggling seniors for over a year. "What do we do about Sarah?" Elena asked. "We help her," Marcus decided. "Give her copies of the journals, the evidence she needs to protect herself. Maybe even some of the money, call it Mansfield's bequest to a colleague. You trust her that much? I trust that we're all in the same boat. Mansfield's dead. The people who killed him are still out there. Sarah's probably on their list. We might be too now. Our best protection is making sure the evidence gets out if anything happens to any of us." Over the following months, they built a careful alliance with Sarah Winters. She helped them understand the full scope of what Mansfield had documented, a web of financial crimes reaching into government, spreading across industries, protected by violence when necessary. In return, they shared selective portions of their discovery. Not the full amount, but enough to secure Sarah's future and fund her own disappearance if needed. She established herself in a coastal town under a new identity, close enough to meet quarterly, but far enough to avoid connecting their lives. Richard would have liked you, she told them during one visit. He always said the best criminals were the ones who didn't mean to be criminals, the ones forced into it by circumstance. "We're not criminals," Elena protested. "Aren't we? We're sitting on stolen money, covering up evidence of murders, laundering cash through shell companies. The only difference between us and the people who killed Richard is that we're doing it to survive, not thrive." The distinction mattered to Elena's conscience, if not to law. They continued their careful existence, improving their lives incrementally while maintaining the fiction of genteel poverty. The house grew comfortable, but not luxurious. Their health improved with consistent care, but they still played up the infirmities of age when necessary. Carmen visited with her family, marveling at her parents' resilience. "I can't believe you've made this place so nice," she said, not knowing about the midnight phone calls that had anonymously paid off her mortgage, the donations that had secured her children's education. "We're tougher than we look," Marcus told her, hugging his granddaughter while remembering the night they'd almost given up. 5 years passed. The Rodriguezes became fixtures in their rural community, S.A. Adar, the elderly couple who'd saved the Mansfield place from ruin. Marcus gained recognition for his restoration skills, helping neighbors with construction projects in exchange for goods and companionship. Elena became famous for her quilts, each one secretly containing a few gold coins sewn into the batting, gifts that recipients wouldn't discover until years later when hard times might require resources. They never spent lavishly, never drew attention. The fortune in their walls diminished slowly, carefully dispersed to where it could do good. Medical research, scholarship funds, homeless shelters, food banks. Anonymous gifts to struggling families who reminded them of their own desperate situation. "We're redistributing wealth," Elena rationalized, taking from corporations who stole it first and giving to people who need it. Robin Hood with Social Security, Marcus agreed. But they never forgot the danger. Every car that slowed near their driveway raised alarms. Every official letter got scrutinized for threats. They maintained their safeguards, updated their insurance, kept their secrets close. The end came not with violence, but with time. Marcus developed the cough first, dismissing it as sawdust irritation until Elena forced him to see a doctor. Lung cancer, aggressive and advanced. The irony wasn't lost on them. All that hidden money couldn't buy what they'd most wanted. More years together. "I want to tell Carmen," he said one evening, watching sunset paint their kitchen golden. "About everything. Someone should know the full truth." "Not yet," Elena counseled. "Let her remember us as her parents, not as whatever we've become." Marcus died on a Tuesday morning in spring, Elena holding his hand as birds sang outside the window of the house they'd resurrected together. She followed 8 months later, her heart giving out as she'd known it would without him beside her. Carmen found them prepared. All papers in order, the house deed transferred, accounts accessible. The walls had been professionally finished by a contractor who mentioned Mr. Rodriguez had paid cash for the work, insisting on the highest quality materials to last generations. She never found the hidden room. Marcus had sealed it permanently, the fortune entombed like an Egyptian pharaoh's treasure. Only Sarah Winters knew the full truth, and she kept the secret, honoring the unlikely friendship that had saved her life. The house sold to a young couple who loved its character, drawn to the careful craftsmanship visible in every repair. They occasionally heard sounds from the kitchen walls, settling wood, they assumed, or pipes adjusting to temperature changes. Sometimes the wife would pause while cooking, feeling watched. Sometimes the husband would dream of numbers, endless columns of figures that meant nothing on waking. But they were happy in their home, never knowing they walked above millions, slept over secrets, lived atop crimes that had shaped corporate America. The money waited, patient as stone. Perhaps someday another desperate family would swing a hammer during renovation and find their salvation behind drywall. Perhaps the house would stand another century, its secret intact. Or perhaps the truth would emerge through Sarah's careful documentation, exposing crimes when the guilty parties were too dead to prosecute. Marcus and Elena Rodriguez had gambled their last $1,500 on a derelict house and won more than they'd ever imagined. But their true victory wasn't the money. It was the 5 years they'd carved from fate, the dignity they'd preserved, the love that survived both poverty and wealth. In the end, they'd beaten the system that had tried to crush them. They'd outwitted the killers who'd murdered Mansfield. They'd transformed blood money into life-saving gifts for strangers who'd never know their names. Most importantly, they'd stayed true to each other. From their first apartment above the Korean grocery to their final days in the restored mansion, they'd faced every challenge together. The money had been a tool, not a destination. The real treasure had been the journey, and they'd traveled it hand in hand. Carmen kept her parents' camping chairs, the ones they'd bought for $5 at a yard sale during their desperate days. She set them up in her own kitchen, serving coffee to her children while telling them about their grandparents. They started with nothing and built something beautiful, she'd say. Not just the house, though that was impressive. They built a life together that no amount of hardship could break. Were they rich? Her daughter would ask. In every way that mattered, Carmen would answer, never knowing how literally true that was. Mansfield Place still stands, its kitchen wall still hiding secrets. Sometimes local teenagers dare each other to knock on the door, repeating legends about the vanished financial advisor and the elderly couple who tamed his haunted house. The current owners laugh off such stories, secure in their normal lives. But late at night, when the wind blows through the eaves Marcus carefully repaired, you can almost hear whispers of numbers, of transferred accounts, and hidden fortunes. The house remembers everything: Mansfield's paranoia, Marcus's determination, Elena's courage. It keeps its secrets well, waiting for the next desperate souls brave enough to gamble everything on possibility. Because sometimes that's what it takes to win. Not skill or virtue or righteousness, but simple desperation combined with the courage to grab opportunity when it literally breaks through the wall. Marcus and Elena Rodriguez proved that fortune favors not just the bold, but the broken who refuse to stay down. Their story ended as all stories must, with death and memory. But somewhere in a small coastal town, Sarah Winters maintains her vigilance, keeping copies of evidence that could still topple empires. Somewhere in Seattle, Carmen unknowingly spends inheritance, money laundered through so many channels, its origin has become untraceable. Somewhere in college dorms, her children pursue educations funded by anonymous scholarships that appeared just when needed. The ripples of that hidden fortune spread outward, touching lives in ways Richard Mansfield never intended. He'd hoarded wealth as protection, building walls both literal and metaphorical. Marcus and Elena had torn down those walls, releasing the trapped resources like water from a broken dam. They'd entered that house as victims of cancer, of medical bankruptcy, of a system that discards the elderly like worn tools. They'd left it as quiet victors who'd turned catastrophe into opportunity, disaster into deliverance. The money in the walls had been their salvation, but love had been their strength. Together, they'd achieved the impossible. They'd won against odds that should have crushed them, found wealth that should have corrupted them, kept secrets that should have destroyed them. And in the end, they died as they'd lived, hand in hand, facing whatever came next with the same courage that had driven them to spend their last $1,500 on a dream. The house keeps its remaining secrets still, waiting for the next desperate dreamers to discover that sometimes the biggest gambles pay off in ways you never imagined. Sometimes salvation comes disguised as disaster, and sometimes, just sometimes, love is enough to transform blood money into blessing. There you have it, an incredible story of love, desperation, and unexpected fortune. If you enjoyed this tale, make sure to click on one of the 2 stories on your screen for more amazing content that will leave you speechless. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our daily stories of triumph, mystery, and the extraordinary hidden in ordinary lives. See you tomorrow with another mind-blowing story.